Hello everyone. In this series of developing agentic workflows using AutoGen, we have been discussing about the different conversational patterns like two-way chat, group chat, sequential chat pattern, as well as the nested chat pattern. The first three of them we already have dealt with in our previous sessions where we have essentially implemented all of them for specific use cases that we were looking at solving. However, I'll touch base on all of these individual chat patterns to get a quick intro on what exactly they mean. And later we'll do a deep dive into understanding more about what nested chat pattern is and how we implement a proper agentic workflow for a specific use case that we were actually trying to solve in one of our previous sessions. Okay. So the two-way chat here typically means that there are two different agents. Both are conversable agents. So they could be user proxy agent as well as an assistant agent. As we clearly know, both these agents are extended from conversable agent class. So they have this innate ability of exchanging meaningful messages in between them. By exchanging meaningful information or meaningful messages among themselves, we basically try and solve a specific problem here. Okay. Similarly, group chat here typically involves multiple sets of agents. Like we have 4 different agents in our particular case here. Every individual agent is destined to do a specific task. And we also have a manager. Manager here acts as an orchestrator and try and executes this complete agentic workflow by choosing which of these agents could be the next speaker. The next speaker for solving the problem at hand could be agent C, but we clearly do not know what the problem is unless we get to understand the use case clearly and try and implement the agentic workflow as a whole. We have done that in the past. Please revisit our previous session, which involves explaining more on what group chat is and what group chat manager is and how we have created a proper agentic workflow for the given use case that we were trying to solve. But I'll give an overview on how we basically determine which of these agents could be our next speaker. So we clearly leave it to LLM to understand clearly about the intent of our message and let LLM choose which could be the next speaker, and eventually we'll get to solve the problem. So whatever message that agent C would send back to the manager, manager will broadcast the same message to the remaining agents like A, B, and D so that all these agents are context aware. So they are on the same page eventually, right? There are different methods in which we basically let the manager choose the next speaker, which I'm not getting into because we already have done that in the past. Next is a sequential chat pattern. As we can clearly observe this particular diagram, there are two sets of agents. This is agent chat 1 and this is agent chat 2. In the first set of agentic chat, we have this user agent as well as specialist agent. We dealt with a banking problem in one of our previous sessions where there would be a user who is a customer. The customer is interacting with a specialist agent, which typically is a chatbot here, right? This is a chatbot and it is invoking a specialist agent. The specialist agent is agent B in our case. So whatever question that the user has will be answered by specialist agent. So all the conversation that's been done in user and specialist is being sent to the agent chat 2 by using this carryover mechanism. So whatever conversation history that we have, LLM basically summarizes all of them. And the summary is being sent as a context to your next set of agents, which is agent A and agent C. Agent A is nothing but the user agent again. Agent C here is going to be surveyor agent. So surveyor agent with all the summary information that is retained from the previous set of agents will now post a question back to user asking for providing a user experience rating. That's a customer experience rating on the scale of 1 to 10. Surveyor is basically going to collect the user feedback and then we basically end the chat. So we call it a sequential chat pattern because there are two sets of agentic chats that are involved here. Okay, and both these agentic chats are interconnected by this carryover mechanism where the summary of the first conversation is being sent as context to your second set of agents. That's the whole view that we can get from this sequential chat pattern. So similarly, by using the same use case, by using the same banking use case, we will look at modifying this workflow to introduce another agent called as manager agent. Now, the specialist agent, which is agent B, is going to involve a manager agent only in specific criterions. So especially when the specialist agent recognizes that the question that user is asking is very important. or critical. If the question is very critical and the specialist agent cannot take a decision by its own, and that's when this triggering criterion is invoked, especially when there are keywords like important or critical in the queries that the user posts. So agent B, which is a specialist agent, perceives that this particular query that user is asking is very important and critical, and it's beyond my purview. And that's when it invokes manager agent. Manager takes a call there and sends back the message to specialist agent. So specialist agent relays whatever message that's being received from manager back to the user. So user is completely unaware of this particular chat that's occurring in between specialist and manager. So manager is not directly sending a message to user here. Manager is only sending back a message to specialist, especially when the triggering condition is occurred. So specialist just relays back the same message to the user. In this whole workflow, we clearly know that whatever message that manager is sending back to specialist, so user is completely unaware of that. Okay, here we have a nested chat being implemented. So this simply can be considered as a plugin which can be later used in a very complex workflow. Maybe you are trying to solve a different banking problem altogether. So this nested chat workflow can be simply plugged into that complex agentic workflow so that you basically solve a larger complex problem. Okay. And whatever workflow that we are currently implementing allows a single interface for the user. So user is always chatting with a chatbot, which here is a single interface. So in the other workflows related to sequential chat pattern, or in fact the two-way chat or the group chat, it's not a criteria or it's not mandatory that you're always exposed to a single interface like a chatbot here in our case. In the sequential chat pattern, of course, we were dealing with a chatbot, but not always a scenario. However, nested chat patterns allows that flexibility to expose a single interface so that user is seamlessly experiencing the issue resolution. The whole purpose of the user is for the issues to be resolved. It really doesn't matter who is going to answer to the user. In this whole workflow that we have implemented, user is completely unaware of the manager's interaction with specialist. And that's when the customer experience of this particular user is going to go up, right? So that's the whole purpose of it. And now without any further ado, let's go about implementing this whole agentic workflow using AutoGen library, right? So however, I did not discuss about this agent chat 2, which we are typically aware of, that whatever summary that we extract from this particular conversation that occurred, whatever summary that we have or whatever summary that the LLM derives is basically sent as a context to your agent chat 2, where your user is being interacted with the surveyor here. The surveyor collects the feedback information on the scale of 1 to 10 and thereby ends the whole conversation here. Okay, we are modifying the sequential chat pattern that we already have learned to an extent that we are now implementing an additional agent, which is a manager agent, and this is being triggered on specific criteria, especially when the user is asking some queries which are critical. And if there is this particular keyword called critical on the user query, and that's when the specialist would determine that this is not the question that I need to answer, but rather I would send this to manager so that manager can answer this. Manager sends back the answer to that particular question. Specialist simply relays the same message to the end user. Okay, let's get back to VS Code. Let me open Visual Studio Code and then look at implementing the same. This particular Python script does not have anything at the moment. We can simply go about copying the whole sequential.py script that we already have developed, which is for the sequential chat pattern. So I just copy paste this whole thing. Since the nested chat pattern is pretty much similar to the sequential chat pattern that we have earlier implemented, except for a new agent now, which is a manager agent. So now I get back to this particular code and I will go about creating a new agent, new assistant agent, which I'm calling as manager. So this is an additional agent for which I'm changing the name as well as the system message. System message basically defines the role of this particular agent. I already have copied what could be the system message for this particular assistant agent. And I simply go back to the VS Code and then copy all of this. And LLM config would remain LLM config, which we already have set up, which points to GPT-4o model. and all the necessary API keys and base URL details are already provided in .env file. Okay. So now we have created this new agent called manager agent. Now we need to set up, or now we need to register this particular agent with the specialist agent as a nested chat, right? So specialist dot register nested chats, and within parentheses, I'm going to provide an array of different recipients, which are nothing but different agents altogether. In our specific example, we only have one single agent. So there is only one recipient. Now I'm going to register. So the recipient here is clearly going to be the manager agent. So the recipient is going to be the manager agent that we already have created. Along with this, we also provide some additional parameters like what is a summary method? Summary method is the last message. I'm not using reflection with LLM here, but I'm just using last message. I just want to consider only the last message for summary method here. Along with this, we'll also provide a simple message for the nested chat pattern here, which could be like to treat this particular message urgently and respond in a more professional way, or manner, right? Whatever it is. Cool. And once this is done, we'll set up an additional parameter called as max turns. Max turns is equal to 1. So I'm just allowing the specialist to interact with the manager agent only for once. There should be a maximum number of turns, which is going to be a defaulted value to 1 after I have set this particular parameter value to 1. Okay. I believe you have pretty much understood what I'm trying to explain here. So along with this, I'm also looking at setting up a triggering point, right? So what could be the triggering point here? So the triggering point here is necessarily a simple lambda expression, which I am going to consider sender information here. The sender is nothing but user, right? So I'm just validating if it's user proxy agent or not, if the sender of the query is user proxy agent or not. And I'm going to do an additional check by invoking this particular function called Escalate and passing this particular sender information within parentheses as an argument. Okay. I'll try to explain what this lambda expression is all about in a while. Simply copy this user defined function, which I am going to define now. I'm also going to define a new parameter called as sender. Sender here, as we clearly know, is a user agent. User agent is only sending the queries to the specialist agent, right? So I'm just going to collect all of these information or all the chat messages here. I'm going to collect all the chat messages from the sender. I'm assigning this to something called content. And I do not want to collect all these messages, but rather I would want to collect the messages related to user proxy and not the messages related to specialist here. And that's when I basically go about using these functions called next and iter, because this is a generator object. And basically I am referencing to the content of the messages related to the user agent. And I'm assigning this to something called messages, right? I'm going to write a simple list comprehension now, where I'm iterating over the list of messages that I'm having, which is defined from the previous step. And for every message, I'm always referring to the body of the message. I just do not want to include anything else apart from the body of the message. That's all. So now I have all the message contents, right? So with whatever message contents that I'm left with, I basically go about joining them all together into a single string object. I just go about using this join function so that I get all the details into a single string object here. Now let me define the important words. The important words that we can consider to be escalated to the manager here is when we observe these words within the query posted by the user to specialist agent. They could be critical or important or probably ASAP or even urgent. Whenever there is a particular keyword of these important words that is appearing within the query posted by user, the specialist understands that this is not the message that it can answer, but rather it needs to call the manager agent for it to be solved. So this is the triggering criterion. The triggering criterion should be a Boolean true or false. So it should be a Boolean true or false. So this is a trigger. So how do we know that a trigger has occurred or not? We need to write a simple code now where I am iterating over all the words that are present within this list of important words, but I am checking if this word is present in all messages or not, right? So I'm going to check if this particular word, whatever I'm iterating over the list of important words, if it's present in all messages or not. If it is present, so let me wrap this complete thing in this function called any, which is going to return a boolean true or false to me. So if this word is present, if any of these words is present within the query posted by user, we simply return true. Otherwise we return false. That's all. And that's what we are doing here as part of this lambda expression. So we are validating if sender is user proxy agent or not. And if it is, and we're also validating if any of the keywords that is present within the query posted by user does have these important keywords or not. If it does have, then we return true here. If trigger is true, then obviously the specialist is going to invoke manager. If you observe this particular diagram here, we always have this conditional flow. We always check for the trigger. If this is true, then only we are invoking this manager agent, right? And that's what we have implemented now. So once this is done, we basically go about running this whole code and test if whatever code that we have written does make sense or not. Now let's see if this whole agentic workflow that we have implemented works fine or not. I'm just going to type a simple query stating that I am unable to log in to net banking. And I intentionally place this particular keyword called urgent. So the specialist will understand that this is a question that we need to forward to manager agent. And let's see if this actually forwards to the manager agent or not. Okay, it's asking to share the error message. I do not have the error message. This is critical. I'm trying to provide this keyword again. And now you see that the specialist agent now invoked the manager agent. It started a new chat with manager, but the user is completely unaware of it. Manager actually sends an information back to specialist stating that thanks for bringing this matter to our attention, and actually provided some professional message back to the specialist agent. The specialist agent simply relays back that information to the end user. That's all. It's not going to do anything. Since I'm done with the whole workflow related to the nested chat pattern, I'm just exiting from this chat. So once I exit from this chat, we basically would terminate this chat. And now whatever summary information that LLM perceives from this whole conversation that happened is now forwarded to surveyor as a context. And obviously the surveyor is going to ask me to provide a feedback. I'm going to provide some feedback to it. And now the surveyor replies back to user, thanking for providing the feedback. And it also recognized that we have provided a positive experience related feedback. Now I'm exiting from the chat so that we terminate the whole workflow, because there are only 2 agentic chats that are involved here. This was the first set of agents where we typically have provided a user query to this particular agent, which is a specialist agent, intentionally having that keyword, which is critical. Or even we had this keyword called urgent. I do not know why it did not recognize immediately, but in the process, it recognized that whatever query that we have asked is not supposed to be answered by specialist itself, but it needs to be answered by the manager agent. And since the trigger condition is now true, manager basically sent back some information to specialist agent. The specialist agent sent back the same message to user. And that's what we have observed. So once this particular workflow is done, we also observed that the whole summary of it is now forwarded as content or context to your subsequent agentic chat, where the surveyor agent collected the user feedback. I provided a value of 10, and it was very happy about the positive feedback that we have provided. And the whole agentic workflow was exited or ended here. Okay. So this is how you can implement a nested chat pattern. We basically have registered this manager agent as a nested chat pattern with the specialist agent. So this entity can be plugged into any other complex workflow related to banking problems or related to banking workflows here. Okay, that's the whole purpose of having nested chat patterns. Okay, so that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss with you in this particular session, and see you in the next. Thanks for watching.